The bridge of the Coalition flagship hummed with its usual quiet efficiency. Fleet Commander Reed stood tall, his forearms clasped behind his back as he watched the main display. The massive ship, nearly 2 miles long, represented the peak of Coalition engineering. Its smooth pearl-white hull housed enough firepower to level a small moon. "Commander, unknown contact at bearing 347, reported the sensor officer, his antennae twitching with excitement. "It's approaching from the outer system." Reed turned his attention to the readings. The vessel was small, barely a quarter the size of his flagship. Its hull was dark and angular, nothing like the elegant designs of Coalition ships. Energy readings suggested primitive fusion drives, and the hull material appeared to be simple steel alloys. "Fascinating," said Intelligence Officer Marcus, leaning forward at his station. "The design is completely foreign to our database." His fingers danced across the holographic display as he analyzed the approaching ship. "Sir, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures. They don't match any known patterns." Reed waved a dismissive hand. "Probably interference from their crude propulsion system." He straightened his ceremonial collar, a symbol of Coalition authority. "Open a channel. Let's show these newcomers how civilized species behave." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the alien vessel. Reed was surprised to see beings that looked almost like the primitive species they'd observed on nearby worlds. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin with no scales or proper protection. They wore dark uniforms with simple insignia. "This is Fleet Commander Reed of the Stellar Coalition. You have entered our sovereign space. Identify yourselves immediately." The alien captain, a stocky creature with graying hair, replied calmly. "This is Captain Stone of the HMS Thunderchild. We're on a routine patrol mission. We weren't aware this sector was claimed territory." Reed noted the strange name. Their language translator was working, but the designation HMS meant nothing to him. "Your vessel appears to be armed," he said. "The Coalition doesn't permit unauthorized military ships in our space. We maintain defensive capabilities as any prudent explorer would," Stone replied, his expression unchanging. "We're happy to withdraw if this is your territory." Something about the humans' calm demeanor bothered Reed. Most species showed proper deference when confronted by a Coalition dreadnought. These creatures seemed almost unconcerned. "Sir," Marcus interrupted, his voice tense, "I'm detecting power fluctuations in their hull. The energy readings are, sir, they're like nothing I've seen before." Reed ignored him. These primitives needed to learn respect. "Your vessel will power down and prepare for boarding. We'll need to verify your peaceful intentions." Stone's expression hardened slightly. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Commander. We don't allow boarding of our military vessels. If you insist, we'll consider it a hostile act." The bridge crew murmured in disbelief. Reed felt his scales flush with anger. "You dare threaten the Coalition? Look at your vessel. It's primitive, small. We could destroy it with a single volley." "Sir," Marcus called out again, more urgently, "their power readings just spiked. I'm detecting multiple targeting systems activating. Their hull composition is changing somehow." Stone leaned forward slightly. "Commander Reed, I recommend you check your readings again. We've dropped our stealth systems since you seem intent on escalation." New data flooded the Coalition screens. What had appeared to be simple metal plates were now revealing layer upon layer of advanced composites. Weapon ports appeared where there had been nothing. Energy readings jumped off the scales. "Impossible," Reed whispered. The small ship was now showing power outputs that rivaled his flagship. "This is your final warning," Stone said quietly. "Withdraw your boarding threat, and we can discuss this like civilized beings. Otherwise—" He didn't finish the sentence. Reed felt the first trickle of fear run down his spine. He looked at Marcus, who was frantically analyzing the new data. "Sir," the intelligence officer said, "I don't think that's a patrol boat. Based on these readings, I think it's a human warship." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The bridge crew froze, all 6 eyes of each officer fixed on the main screen. The small, dark vessel now seemed to loom larger than their massive flagship. Stone waited patiently for their response, his calm demeanor now seeming less like weakness and more like the confidence of a predator. The humans had hidden their true nature until threatened, and now Reed had to make a decision that would affect not just his ship, but potentially the entire coalition. Reed's moment of hesitation cost him dearly. Before he could respond to Stone's warning, the human warship moved with impossible speed. The coalition flagship's sensors struggled to track it as it slipped into a blind spot beneath their main guns. "How are they moving like that?" Reed demanded, all 4 hands gripping his command rail. "Their engines should be primitive fusion drives." "Sir, they're using some kind of gravity manipulation," Marcus reported, his antennae curling in distress. "The energy signature suggests they're bending space itself around their hull." The human ship's next move shocked everyone on the bridge. Instead of maintaining a safe distance as any sensible vessel would, the Thunderchild charged straight toward them, rolling to present its smallest profile. "They're mad," shouted the weapons officer. "At that range, our weapons will destroy us both." Captain Stone's face appeared on the screen again. "Commander Reed, I suggest you power down your targeting systems. We've noticed your weapons charging, and we'd hate for this to escalate further." Reed stared in disbelief. The human ship was now so close he could see individual plates on its hull through the visual sensors. No ship had ever dared to come this close to a coalition dreadnought. It was suicide. Unless they knew something he didn't. "Sir," Marcus called out, his voice shaking, "I'm detecting multiple small objects launching from their hull. They're humans in powered armor. They're spacewalking at combat speed." The bridge erupted in chaos as new alerts sounded. The human ship had somehow launched troops during its approach. The armored figures moved with practiced ease through space, using micro-thrusters to navigate between the coalition ship's defense zones. "Impossible," Reed whispered. "No species fights in open space." "The risks." "Commander," Stone's voice cut through the chaos. "Those are just our engineers. They've noticed some interesting vulnerabilities in your shield grid. Would you like them to submit a maintenance report?" The casual threat sent chills through Reed's spine. The humans had deployed soldiers into the vacuum of space, not as a last resort, but as a standard tactic. They moved through the void like it was their natural environment. "Launch our defense drones," Reed ordered. Hundreds of automated protectors swarmed from the flagship's bays, rushing to intercept the human boarders. What happened next would be written into coalition military doctrine for generations. The human soldiers didn't retreat. Instead, they drew small weapons and began picking off drones with precise shots. Each blast somehow passed straight through the coalition's energy shields, as if they weren't there. "Analysis," Reed demanded. Marcus worked frantically at his station. "Sir, they're using some kind of phase-shifted projectiles. Our shields are calibrated for energy weapons. These are physical rounds wrapped in an energy field that matches our shield frequency." Stone watched the display with the same calm expression. "Commander, your drones are well designed. Mind if we keep a few for study? Our engineers find them quite interesting." The human soldiers had already captured several drones, somehow shutting them down with handheld devices. They worked with the efficiency of a species that had mastered warfare in every environment, including the deadly vacuum of space. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "I've been analyzing their ship's design. Sir, I don't think this is one of their main warships. The size and configuration. I believe this is what humans call a corvette, a small patrol vessel." Reed felt his blood run cold. If this was just a patrol ship, what were their actual warships like? The humans had taken apart his best defenses with a vessel they considered small. "Captain Stone," Reed said, trying to keep his voice steady, "perhaps we can discuss this situation more diplomatically." Stone nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "A fine suggestion, Commander. Though I should mention that our last transmission about this disagreement has probably reached the nearest human battle group by now. They'll be arriving shortly to ensure our diplomatic discussions remain peaceful." As if to punctuate his words, new contacts appeared on the coalition sensors. Larger ships, much larger, emerged from what seemed like tiers in space itself. The humans had developed jump technology that didn't require fixed gates. Reed looked at his sensor display, then at the human captain's unwavering expression, and made the first wise decision of the day. He ordered his weapons power down. The Coalition's response fleet arrived first, their massive ships dropping out of hyperspace in a display of light and power. 30 vessels, each larger than Reed's flagship, formed up in the traditional crescent formation. The sight would have made any other species surrender immediately. The humans didn't seem impressed. "Quite a fleet," Captain Stone remarked, watching the new arrivals on his screen. "Though you might want to adjust your formation. That crescent pattern leaves your center rather exposed." Before Reed could respond, his communications officer jumped up. "Sir, emergency broadcast from Coalition Command. They're detecting human ships appearing at every major Coalition outpost. They've been there for weeks, cloaked. The humans had been watching them, studying them." The realization hit Reed like a physical blow. Every patrol route, every defense station, every supposedly secret installation. The humans had mapped them all. Admiral Thompson of the human fleet appeared on all channels, his weathered face a stark contrast to the Coalition's pearl-white bridges. "This is Admiral Thompson of the 3rd Frontier Fleet. We've been monitoring Coalition space for some time now. Your encounter with the Thunderchild has forced us to accelerate our first contact plans." The Coalition Fleet Commander, High Admiral Vale, demanded, "How dare you spy on our sovereign territory? This is an act of war." Thompson's response was measured but carried an edge of steel. "With respect, Admiral Vale, we began our observation after detecting your own stealth probes in human space 3 years ago. We merely showed more patience in making ourselves known." The revelation stunned the Coalition Command. Their best stealth ships, supposedly undetectable, had been spotted years ago. The humans had simply waited, watching, learning. More human ships appeared, their dark hulls seeming to materialize from nothing as they dropped their cloaking fields. They took positions that somehow negated every advantage of the Coalition's crescent formation. It was like watching master players surround a novice's pieces on a game board. "Sir," Marcus called to Reed, his voice tight with concern. "The human ships. They're not in any formation we recognize, but every time our fleet moves, they shift slightly. They're hurting us." Reed watched in growing horror as the human fleet's strategy became clear. Every Coalition movement had been anticipated. The humans had positioned themselves to control every possible escape route, every tactical advantage point. "Your ships are impressive," Thompson offered to Vale. "But you might want to reconsider your reliance on energy shields. They're quite vulnerable to our phase torpedoes, as I believe Captain Stone demonstrated earlier." Vale's response was cut off by new alarms. Human fighters launched from their carriers, hundreds of them. The small craft moved with impossible precision, weaving patterns that seemed random but somehow strengthened their fleet's position even further. "Coalition doctrine suggests you're about to attempt a mass energy burst from your fleet's combined shields," Thompson continued casually. "I should warn you, we've developed countermeasures for that tactic. Would you like a demonstration?" The Coalition commanders watched in stunned silence as the human fighters began emitting some kind of interference field. Their carefully planned shield burst would be worse than useless now. It would probably backfire. Marcus, still monitoring from Reed's flagship, made a devastating discovery. "Sir, these human ships, they're not their newest designs. Based on the wear patterns and energy signatures, some of these vessels are decades old. They're using proven technology rather than their latest developments." Thompson's next words confirmed their worst fears. "I should mention that this is just our frontier fleet. We maintain it out here to handle pirates and train our junior officers. Our main battle groups are somewhat more substantial. The Coalition's greatest armada, 30 ships of unmatched power, had just been outmaneuvered by what the humans considered a training fleet. The implications were staggering. Vale's voice shook slightly as he responded. Perhaps we should discuss the exact boundaries of our respective territories. A wise suggestion, Thompson agreed. Though first, I believe we need to address your recent military buildup along what you thought was unclaimed space. We have some concerns about those new weapon platforms you've been installing. The Coalition commanders shared looks of pure shock. The humans knew about the secret installations. They knew everything. The question was no longer whether to negotiate, but how much of their military secrets the humans had already uncovered. The peace lasted exactly 3 minutes. A young Coalition captain, fresh from the academy and filled with misplaced confidence, launched the first strike. His ship fired a full spread of plasma torpedoes at the nearest human vessel. Well, Admiral Thompson sighed. I suppose someone had to start it. The human response was unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. Instead of evading or raising shields, the targeted human ship accelerated straight into the incoming fire. It rolled with precise timing, letting the plasma torpedoes slip past its hull with mere meters to spare. Impossible, Vale shouted. No crew can survive those maneuvers. The G-forces alone. Inertial dampeners, Thompson replied calmly. We solved that problem about 200 years ago. Now please watch carefully. This will be educational. The human ship that had dodged the torpedoes suddenly split apart. What the Coalition had thought was one vessel revealed itself to be 3 smaller ships flying in perfect formation. So close together, they appeared as a single signature. Standard wolf pack formation, Thompson explained as chaos erupted. An old submarine tactic we adapted for space. Works quite well, doesn't it? The 3 human ships pounced on the Coalition vessel that had fired first. They didn't use energy weapons or plasma torpedoes. Instead, they fired what looked like solid metal slugs. The projectiles, accelerated to relativistic speeds, passed through the Coalition's energy shields like they weren't even there. Kinetic weapons in space combat, Reed whispered in disbelief. But that's primitive. Marcus, still analyzing data from his station, shook his head. Sir, those aren't simple bullets. They're using gravity drives to accelerate them. The energy reading from a single shot. It's higher than our main gun's full power output. More Coalition ships joined the fight, unable to watch their companion be attacked. The human fleet responded with practiced precision. Their formation shifted like liquid metal, always presenting the smallest possible target while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Launch all fighters, Vale ordered. Thousands of Coalition drones filled space, their AI pilots ready to overwhelm the humans with numbers. Thompson actually smiled. Ah, finally. Our pilots were getting bored. Lieutenant Wilson, you may begin the demonstration. Human fighters swooped into the drone swarm. Unlike the robotic Coalition fighters, each human craft had a living pilot. They fought with a creativity and adaptability that no eye could match. Within minutes, the space around the fleets was filled with expanding clouds of drone debris. Sir, Marcus called out to Reed. The human fighters, they're not just destroying our drones. They're hacking them. Some of our drones are turning around. The Coalition watched in horror as their own drones began attacking their ships. The humans had somehow transmitted computer viruses during combat, turning the Coalition's weapons against them. Electronic warfare, Thompson explained, almost apologetically. We find it quite effective. Your AI security could use some updating, by the way. A Coalition heavy cruiser exploded, its reactor breached by precise hits from the reprogrammed drones. The humans hadn't even used their own weapons for that kill. This is your last warning, Thompson announced to all ships. Power down your weapons and engines. Any further hostile action will be met with our full response. So far, we've been using standard containment protocols. You won't enjoy seeing our actual combat procedures. Vale, watching his mighty fleet being systematically dismantled, felt a chill at Thompson's words. What do you mean containment protocols? These are police actions, Thompson replied. The kind of tactics we use for pirates and smugglers. If you force us to switch to military protocols. He left the threat unfinished. The battle paused as his words sank in. The humans had been fighting with restricted rules of engagement. They had systematically taken apart the coalition's best ships while following peacekeeping protocols. Sir, Marcus said quietly to Reed, I've figured out why their ships look so strange to our sensors. They're covered in armor. Physical, metal armor. They built their ships expecting to be hit. The revelation struck Reed hard. The coalition built their ships with the most powerful shields possible, believing that getting hit meant death. The humans built their ships to take damage and keep fighting. They had designed their entire fleet around the assumption that they would be wounded in battle and would need to continue anyway. For the first time, Reed understood what they were truly facing. This wasn't just a technologically advanced species. This was a race that had mastered the art of war itself. Vale ordered his remaining ships to form a sphere, a defensive formation that had never failed in coalition history. Shields overlapped, creating layers of energy that could withstand any known weapon. At least, any weapon they had known about before today. Interesting choice, Thompson commented, watching the coalition ships draw together. But you might want to reconsider packing your ships so closely together, unless you're trying to make our job easier. The coalition admiral ignored the warning. All ships initiate synchronized shield pulse. Full power to forward arrays. The sphere of coalition ships began to glow as they poured energy into their shields, preparing to release it in a devastating wave. Thompson sighed. Very well. Commander Baker, you may proceed with the gravity lance demonstration. A single human ship, smaller than the others, moved forward. Its hull split open like a blooming flower, revealing a massive weapon unlike anything the coalition had ever seen. The device didn't glow or hum with energy. It simply existed, a dark mass that seemed to bend light around it. Sir, Marcus called out, his voice shaking. That weapon. It's creating a localized distortion in space-time. They're not generating energy. They're manipulating gravity itself. The human ship fired. There was no beam, no projectile, no visible effect at all. Instead, a portion of space between the fleets simply compressed. The coalition's carefully formed sphere crumpled as if crushed by a giant hand. Ships that had cost billions to build were twisted like toys. A gentle demonstration, Thompson noted. Just 5% power. Enough to disrupt your formation without destroying your ships, though I should mention that your crews will be experiencing some rather unpleasant gravitational effects. I suggest they evacuate the damaged sections quickly. Vale stared at his ruined formation in shock. How? Our best scientists said gravity manipulation on this scale was impossible. Impossible is a strong word, Thompson replied. We found it quite possible once we started thinking three-dimensionally. Your shield technology is impressive, but it only works against energy and matter. It's rather ineffective against space itself. The coalition's remaining ships try to adapt, spreading out to avoid presenting a concentrated target. But the humans had anticipated this too. Their fleet moved in perfect coordination, herding the coalition vessels into killing zones they hadn't even realized existed. Sir, Marcus shouted to Reed. The human ships, they're not following any pattern we can predict because they're not using automated targeting. Each ship has a human crew making independent decisions. Reed watched as human vessels performed maneuvers that would have overloaded any tactical computer. They ignored optimal firing solutions in favor of seemingly random attacks that somehow always worked. They deliberately exposed their flanks, baiting coalition ships into traps. You're beginning to understand, Thompson said, noting the change in coalition tactics. But I'm afraid it's a bit late for that. You see, we've just received word that your high command is mobilizing your reserve fleet. That would violate the terms we offered for surrender. A new set of signals appeared on the coalition screens. More human ships were emerging from Cloak, but these were different. They were larger, darker, bristling with weapons that made the gravity lance look primitive. Those, Thompson said quietly, are actual warships. What you faced so far were retrofitted civilian vessels and training ships. We try not to use military hardware in police actions. It tends to be excessive. The coalition commanders watched in growing horror as the human warships moved into position. Their sensors couldn't even begin to analyze the weapons mounted on these new arrivals. The ships moved with impossible grace, their black hulls seeming to swallow light itself. Now then, Thompson continued, his voice taking on an edge of steel, shall we discuss the terms of surrender again? Or would you prefer a demonstration of what these ships can actually do? Marcus, still at his station on Reed's flagship, made one final, terrifying discovery. Sir, these new ships, they're not new at all. Based on their design and wear patterns, they're decades old. These are their obsolete warships. The revelation hit the coalition commanders like a physical blow. If these terrifying vessels were considered outdated by human standards, what did their modern fleet look like? What kind of weapons had they developed that made gravity manipulation seem primitive? Reed looked at the human warships, then at his own ruined fleet, and realized that the coalition had made the greatest mistake in its history. They hadn't just underestimated human technology, they had underestimated humanity itself. Marcus worked frantically at his station, analyzing the battle data while the fleets faced each other in tense silence. His hands flew across the holographic controls as he decoded intercepted human communications. What he found made his blood run cold. Sir, he called to Reed, the humans. They're using basic radio waves for some of their communications. Simple, unencrypted signals that any species could intercept. Reed turned from the main display, puzzled. Why would they use such primitive technology when they clearly have better options? Because, Marcus realized, they want us to hear it. They're letting us listen to their tactical communications on purpose. And sir, they're holding back. Their ships are operating at less than 30% power. The coalition analysts across the fleet began reporting similar findings. The humans had deliberately used outdated technology and basic tactics. They wanted the coalition to understand exactly how outmatched they were. A new transmission caught their attention. Two human ships were discussing repair procedures in plain, unencrypted signals. Engineering reports hull integrity at 98%, one crew reported. Those coalition plasma bolts barely scratched the paint. Copy that, came the response. Recommend we let them hit us a few more times. Command wants data on their weapons' effectiveness against our civilian-grade armor. The casual conversation struck the coalition commanders like a physical blow. Their most powerful weapons were being allowed to hit their targets, just so the humans could gather data. They weren't even worth using military-grade defenses against. Sir, Marcus continued, his voice shaking, I've analyzed their fleet movements. They're using ancient battle formations. Tactics from their historical naval warfare, adapted for space. These aren't new strategies they developed for us. They're using proven techniques that worked for them centuries ago. Vale, listening from his command ship, felt the full weight of their situation crash down on him. They're not testing their weapons against us, he realized. They're testing us against their oldest, most basic capabilities. Thompson's voice cut through the silence. I see you've been studying our communications. Find anything interesting? The human admiral's casual tone carried a clear message. He knew they had been listening. He had wanted them to understand. Your weapons are impressive, Thompson continued. The plasma torpedoes, in particular, showed some promise. With a few modifications, they might even be effective against our lighter vessels. Would you be interested in discussing some potential improvements? The offer stunned the coalition commanders. The humans were willing to share technology. After being attacked, Marcus made another discovery that explained their confidence. Sir, I found references in their communications to something called the Frontier Defense Protocol. Sir, this entire fleet is just a small part of their border patrol. They have similar forces stationed along every approach to their territory. Reed struggled to grasp the implications. The force that had just demolished the coalition's best ships was considered nothing more than a routine border guard by human standards. We've also decoded more of their ship classifications, Marcus added. The vessels they called retrofitted civilian ships, they're converted mining vessels. They use them for training because their industrial equipment can be easily modified for combat. The ships that just arrived, the ones we thought were warships. He paused, double-checking his findings. They're retired vessels, ships they considered too old for frontline service. Thompson's image appeared on their screens again. I assume by now you've analyzed enough of our communications to understand your situation. The coalition fought well, but there are some fundamental flaws in your approach to space warfare. We'd be willing to help you address them. Vale found his voice at last. Help us? After we attacked you? Of course, Thompson replied with a slight smile. You're not the first species to mistake technological advancement for military superiority. We made the same mistake ourselves, long ago. It's why we maintain these older ships and basic tactics, to remind ourselves that victory doesn't always go to the most advanced force. The human admiral's words carried centuries of military wisdom. The coalition had relied on superior technology and overwhelming force. The humans had relied on experience, adaptability, and tactics proven through actual combat. Now then, Thompson continued, shall we discuss the real reason we've been watching your territory? We've detected some concerning activity along your borders with the Void sector. Activity that suggests you might need allies in the near future. The command deck of the human flagship Enterprise was unlike anything the coalition leaders had ever seen. While their ships featured pristine white walls and holographic displays, the human bridge was darker, more practical, with physical backup systems alongside advanced technology. Reed and Vale had been invited aboard for direct negotiations, and what they saw changed their understanding of humanity forever. The Void sector, Thompson explained, pointing to a three-dimensional map floating between them. Your deep space sensors detected them 3 months ago. Ours detected them 3 years ago. They're coming, and they don't respond to any attempts at communication. The map showed massive objects moving through deep space, each larger than anything the Coalition had ever built. They were headed straight for Coalition space. We call them planet killers. Thompson continued. We've encountered their kind before, in other sectors. They consume everything in their path, ships, stations, even entire worlds. They're why we maintain such a strong military presence, even in peacetime. Vale stared at the data in horror. Why didn't you warn us? We tried, Thompson replied, bringing up records of transmissions. Those trade ships that visited your ports, the diplomatic missions that requested meetings, all carried warnings. Your automated defense systems classified them as potential threats and turned them away. We had to resort to watching and waiting. Reed remembered those incidents. Standard Coalition protocol was to reject any unscheduled contact attempts from unknown species. They had thought they were being cautious. Instead, they had been ignoring warnings of their own destruction. The mining ships you saw earlier, Thompson explained, we use them because they're designed to crack open asteroids. Turns out those same tools work pretty well against planet killer armor. The gravity lance, originally a mining tool for breaking up dense mineral deposits. Humanity learned long ago that the line between civilian tools and military weapons is very thin. Marcus, who had been invited to join the discussion due to his insights, studied the human bridge crew with fascination. Unlike Coalition ships where each officer worked in isolation, the humans constantly communicated, sharing observations and suggestions. Your combat techniques, he said suddenly. They're not just about winning battles, are they? Every engagement is also a training exercise. You're constantly preparing your crews for something worse. Thompson nodded approvingly. The planet killers are just one threat we've encountered. Space is vast and often hostile. Every battle, even ones like today, is a chance to learn and improve. That's why we let your weapons hit us. Our engineers are already designing better armor based on the data. Vale looked troubled. Our fleet was considered the pinnacle of Coalition technology. But against these planet killers, would have lasted approximately 6 minutes. Thompson finished. But that's why we're here. Together, we might stand a chance. Your shield technology, combined with our offensive capabilities and battle experience, it could work. Reed watched as human crew members moved around the bridge, some wearing simple cloth uniforms while others worked in powered armor. They had no standardization, no rigid protocols. Each person used whatever tools best suited their role. Your offer to help us, Reed said slowly, even after we attacked you. Why? Thompson's expression grew serious. Because humanity learned something important during our own development. The galaxy doesn't care about winners and losers in small conflicts. Out there, either we all survive together, or we all fall separately. The Coalition leaders looked at each other, centuries of pride and protocol weighing against survival. Vale made the decision. The Coalition accepts your offer of alliance, he declared, though our people will have much to adjust to. Thompson smiled. Don't worry too much about that. Your ships managed to scratch our paint in a few places. That's better than most first contacts manage. With some training and cooperation, we can help each other survive what's coming. As if to emphasize his words, the massive display showed more planet killers emerging from deep space. The threat was real, and it was coming for them all. Now then, Thompson said, pulling up detailed schematics of both human and Coalition ships, let's talk about how to combine your shield harmonics with our gravity weapons. And maybe we can show you some improvements for those plasma torpedoes of yours. After all, he grinned, we've got some experience in making primitive weapons work against advanced technology. The Coalition officers looked at the approaching threat, then at their new allies, and realized that perhaps being outmatched in battle had been the best thing that could have happened to them. Sometimes, it takes losing a fight to find a friend.